Well, never mind. I'm just going to leave that one alone. So today we are available for an adventure if you're willing. Michael, would you do me a favor and close that door for me? Thank you. Anybody up for an adventure? Yes. Okay. So it's not that adventurous. Every once in a while, I just like to know. It's nice to know. But every once in a while, I like to do what I call a Stump the Chump Sunday. Stump the Chump, me being this chump. And so the opportunity, I know there's a reason you're here today. There's a question in your heart. There's something you're seeking, or you may be looking for a date. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons. People come to church. I'm very much aware of that. But today, I just wanted to kind of open up to some questions and see where that takes us. Now, I want to set this up properly, though. So take a moment. So my friend, Reverend Sally, who we're so delighted is chosen, or God chose her, or she chose God to be here in Charlotte, will assist us. So we'll take a few questions. We'll see what gets revealed for us and see where that goes. But I want us to take just a moment to center in. And then, so close your eyes for a moment. Take a few deep breaths. Breathing in, releasing the breath. Breathing in, releasing the breath. Notice, as you breathe in, notice the gap between the in-breath and the out-breath. Notice the gap. Notice the stillness. Notice the place. And from that place of openness, let us imagine that if we were given the opportunity to speak with a master, with Jesus, Buddha, any of the other enlightened souls, and we got to have one question, what would that question be? Allow your heart to be open. Know that wisdom comes in many ways. You can open your eyes. I'll let you. So, who has a question? Well, maybe they're not as adventurous as they said they were. It can be about unity. It can be about life. It can be about.
I'll get you in a second.
I guess my question would be...
Tell me your name.
My name is Thomas. My name is Thomas.
Great. Thank you, Thomas.
I guess my only question would be knowing what they would know ahead of time. Forgetting about my personal life or anything like that, but when you see all the suffering in the world, if you know ahead of time that things are going to be this bad, if you knew ahead of time that like 6 million Jews would be, or slavery or anything like that, why would you do it anyway?
Why would you come to this earth?
Exactly.
Okay, great. Beautiful question. Thank you. And is it doubting Thomas or just Thomas? Right. Beautiful question. If you're an enlightened, or if you're a spiritual being and you know that you get to come to this dimension and you know that some difficult things are going to happen, why would you do such a thing? So that's such a great question. So here's the thing. Here's what we'd suggest. That we are all spiritual beings. Unity teaches that we are spiritual beings, that there is a part of us that is connected with the divine, not separate from God, but rather the vehicle through which the divine can express itself. And so we live in that spiritual dimension as a part of a unified whole. In that dimension, we're whole, perfect, complete, we're omnipresent, always available. And yet, we don't fully get to experience that until we experience a sense of form. So I believe that we are, as spiritual beings, we say in order to really evolve as a soul, I need to have a vehicle through which I can experience life in ways that I can't experience in this dimension. And so at some level, we incarnate into a physical being, into a physical body, and in that body, we get to experience what we would not experience. I often say when I'm doing a memorial service that, if you imagine that there's a baby in the womb, and we'd say to that baby, know that you are loved, you are guided, you're protected. I mean, being a baby in the womb is a pretty sweet deal. It's warm, it's comfortable, 24-hour room service, it's a good deal. And then the earthquake comes. You're like, wait a minute, what happened? And imagine just taking that one step further. Imagine there was a collective womb in which the babies were hanging out. And they all go, oh my God, did you hear that horrible thing that happened to Sam? He got shaken out. Where is he? But Sam now gets to have an experience of sunlight on the face. Gets to have the experience of physical being. He gets to have the experience of illness. Gets to have the experience of great sex. Gets to have the experience of being in physical form. So the thing that happens for many of us is we forget that in the choice to take on this body, that we remain a spiritual being. Right? That we were still a spiritual being, but through whatever that process is, when we come into form, then we start to identify ourselves as the body. And as we go along, we begin to identify ourselves as other things. Moms and dads and husbands and wives and engineers and architects and all of the things that we begin to think this is who we are. But the truth is, we are spiritual beings. We are having a human experience in its fullness. Experiencing light, experiencing dark, experiencing pain, experiencing sorrow. Why would we want to do that? Well, I think it's for the soul's evolution, right? And so because we forget, because we forget, then we treat each other as if we're not all holy, sacred beings. Just as the story I gave you about African American men and Tibetan men coming together could see only their separation, but when they realized they had a common story, then they could experience love in a way that couldn't experience before. So, why questions I tend to stay away from? I'm like, I don't know. But understanding, and I think the evolution, the awakening that we're feeling that we are part of, is that remembrance that we are spiritual beings and we're at choice. We can either remember who we are and live accordingly, or we can just be stupid, right? The universe loves us so much, it says, let's go. You want to be stupid, right? Sometimes when you're raising parents, you get to that point like, okay, I gave you everything I got. You're going to keep being stupid. Be stupid. You'll pay your own bills. You get yourself out of jail, right? So the calling is always that we are spiritual beings. As Emerson said, we are lying in silent repose. The divine is waiting in silent repose, waiting for a recognition of itself. So our job is to remember that even though we have these vehicles, we are not the vehicle. It's like when you get a rental car. You got to give it back. But it lets you go places and see Florida if you want to see Florida, right? So, I hope that's helpful.
I have a question about the relationship between faith and courage.
Between faith and courage.
Faith and courage. I was, when you were taking us in just before opening for questions, some names of great people came to mind. Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. and Mandela and Jesus and Buddha. And my interpretation may be absolutely wrong, and that's why I'm putting it out as a question. It seems to me that their courage to step forward and put their lives on the line came from their deep practice of their faith. Is that true?
Maybe. Maybe true, maybe false, could be seen on the above, right? No. So if I'm understanding the question, they were willing to put their lives on the line because of their deep faith, correct? And I would say, referring back to what I just said, the fundamental question for all of us is, do we see ourselves as a human being in search of a spiritual experience, or do we see ourselves as a spiritual being having a human experience? You see, it's a fundamental question. And when we start to see ourselves as spiritual beings having this human experience, when we remember that who we are is transcendent of the physicality, right? Think about this for a moment. All of us were a baby at one time. Came in at 6 pounds, 8 pounds, 10 pounds, whatever. Over the years, you're no longer 8 pounds, right? A few more, right? And you got taller, and you got wider, and you got all of these things, but there's some part of you that remains the same of who you are. Let's say some bad thing happens. You were to lose an arm or lose a leg through an accident. You're still who you are, right? Didn't change you. So that faith is the faith and the recognition that I am that divine being having this human experience. So for me, where Jesus' teachings became revolutionary were not when I was seeing him in a sacrificial way that somehow died for my sins or any of that theology, but rather was the great example. And so when you listen to the words, this is where Christianity became practical and real for me. Greater works than these you will also do. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. That I will be struck down, but I will rise up. See, there's an eternal theme. One of my favorite other stories is the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. That this lifetime experience is calling us to know ourselves, and we're all going to go through trials and tribulations. We're all going to go through challenges. We're going to, at some point, have a supreme ordeal. But out of that supreme ordeal, on the other side comes the gift, right? And that the truth is, so often we get the ministry of prayer requests when people are in the road of trials. Like, take this away. Even Jesus gave us this great example of being in the garden. It's like, can we just talk about this contract we made here for a minute? Can we just take this cup away? Right? Which is that thing, right? When we're like, I know what I was praying for, but I wasn't expecting this. But the surrender to say, I am more than this physical body. I'm given an opportunity, and by identifying, so Martin Luther King was a great example of the power of humanity, the power of brotherly love, the power of being a presence of life and love in the world, working for a greater world. So just, I may not get there with you. You may not get to the promised land, but there is a promised land. There is a possibility. Nelson Mandela spent all those years in prison, but he never allowed his mind to be imprisoned by the circumstances in which he found himself. So the faith is always, I have a faith and a belief in a power greater than myself. The one life that is expressing through me. And when we begin to really understand it, for me, the recognition, so, remember a story of, remember Mary Morrissey and another teacher, and I can't think of who the teacher will come to me. We're sitting, getting ready to go out on a seminar, and the teacher said, "Isn't it amazing when people come to you and they say, 'I just found out I'm going to die. I have this, that, or the other thing.'" And he's like, "You just found this out? You never knew you were going to die before, right? I mean, right? We're all going to die. Sorry to break it to you. But that part of us which is eternal will live on. Goes on to experience the next part of our evolution journey. So that's the faith that you speak of, is that I've come, I'm going to do my work, I'm going to bring forth that which is within me, I'm going to give my gift in the way that it is presented for me, and ultimately the commitment is more to who I am and the message I bring than the circumstances surrounding me. Does that feel cool? Thank you. Jim. Get a little tennis action going here, Sally.
I just wondered, could you talk about the importance of individual liberty and freedom relative to spiritual growth and development?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Would you talk about the importance of having individual liberty and freedom for spiritual growth and individual spiritual growth and development?
Sure. So if I'm understanding the question, the difference between or the having individual choice and spiritual growth. So you see, it doesn't work if we don't get choice, right? We don't get to have the experience. That's just God playing puppet, right? So we are created in the image and likeness of the divine, which is to say that, well, see, we've confused this. So we've said, well, then God must look like us. Well, I'm going to suggest you know. What that means is that we are a part of the ocean. We are a drop within the ocean. And all of the qualities of the ocean are available in the drop. So you see a wave crashing, you see this drop come up in the air and return back to the source, right? It still retains its characteristics and quality. So when we are given the opportunity to have earth time, physical body time, it wouldn't work if we were just being controlled by something. Without the element of free will, of choice, we don't really get to have the experience of our divinity. Now, many people, you might know some of them, act as if they're not at choice all the time. They say things like, I have to go to work. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to be a good Christian. I have to be a good Buddhist. I have to. And it's like, no, you don't. That's the great thing about this dimension. You can be a complete jerk. You'll pay the consequences of it because that's what we understand. There are universal laws at work. There are universal laws. And so I can make the step off of this stage and say, I don't believe in the power of gravity. And gravity could not care or less. Luckily, it's not a far step, right? Likewise, if it's a cliff, I don't believe in gravity. You're still going to land because the principles are at work. Again, for me, that fundamental shift when I moved from an old way of thinking where I saw God as rewarding some, punishing others, playing favorites, all that sort of thing, to understand that this universal presence is always fulfilling itself. It is always making itself known. The very nature of life is to fulfill itself. We know that if we plant a seed and we nurture the seed will grow into its own kind. Carrots become carrots. Tomato seeds become tomatoes. right? There's a divine intelligence within that. We as human beings have the opportunity to say, forget that that's who we are and act accordingly. But we will, there are always consequences for the choices that we make, right? Not being punished by God, but rather we are punished by our choices and our actions. In other words, there's a thing called karma. What goes around comes around, right? So it becomes wonderful to say, in order for me to fulfill myself, I may want to play at a higher level. I haven't liked the consequences of the choices that I've made up until now. I was talking about how I went through so many relationships because I wanted my partner to make me happy as it is written in the books. Right? Where's this happily ever after piece? They didn't get it, and I didn't get it. I'm about to be happy, and then from that place of wholeness, choosing loving relationships. So we're always a choice. We don't always get to choose everything that happens to us. Sometimes things happen that are way beyond our control. And yet, if we're willing to do the work, we see that everything that is in our lives is an opportunity for greater spiritual growth, for greater awareness, for greater possibility. Okay. So, there was a couple. You may have heard of them. Adam and Eve. I love this story. It seems like appropriate to say it. So this is Bible according to Marty, obviously, right? So Adam and Eve are created. Two different versions of how they're created. Doesn't matter. Here they are. They're in the garden. Happy, well-fed, well-supplied, naked, enjoying the garden that we've manifest ourselves in. And in the garden, there are two trees. There is the tree of life, and there is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the message, we got confused about apples a long time ago. It's not about apples. The message is, stay away from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In other words, stay away from duality. Stay away from seeing good and bad, right and wrong, right? All of the judgment that we place on how it should be. Don't eat that, because if you eat that, then all of a sudden you're going to notice you're naked. Now you got to do clothes, so that means you're going to have to get a job. You're going to have to do all of this stuff, right? You're going to suffer the pains of child. I mean, all that goes on to kind of explain what's going to happen, but they do it anyways, because why wouldn't they? Every person that ever had the opportunity, like, don't do that. Okay, I will, right? So, right? So I love this story. Is like, what do we choose? So unity, interesting title, unity is saying, live in the tree of life. See the oneness. We can appreciate polarity, which polarity teaches that there's complementary aspects to everything. Right? Electricity works as there's a positive and negative charge to it. The Tao is the symbol of light and dark within each other and finding the middle way. There's polarity within the one, but not duality, not separation. Right? Because as soon as you get two, you no longer have oneness. Isn't that interesting? So, just for fun, if you want to go check your Bible, it's there. It's there. No apples. Not even sure it was a serpent, but that's a whole other story. Right? So does that make sense? That we are experiencing this life, I believe, because we chose. We're like, this is the e-ticket. There's all these souls out there going, wow, I've heard Earth is an amazing ride. Yeah, you get to suffer pain, you get to experience joy, and you do get to have great sex at least once in your life, right? So, it's all adults. It's okay. We can have this conversation, right? So, souls are lining up because this is our unfoldment. And it presents a unique opportunity for us not to get bound by the form. It's like, you go to the counter, you rent the rental car, and somewhere you go, I'm a rental car. Look at me, I'm a Camaro. Oh, no, you're not. You're just driving a vehicle, right? You're still who you are. Be that. Love the vehicle. Take care of the vehicle. Be a good driver. And realize at some point you will give the car back. And you'll move on to your next experience, the next dimension. And if you've learned what your soul came here to learn, then you get to do what's next. If you don't, you still get to do what's next. It's all soul's evolution, right? I don't know all this stuff. I wasn't there. So I'm always kind of amazed when people tell you what happens on the other side. And it's like, really? You go, come back and tell me, right? It's all theory for all of us. We'll figure it out when we get on the other dimension. But in the meantime, what's happening now? What's happening in this garden? What's happening in my garden? What's happening in my heart? What am I bringing to contribute to the evolution of the soul of humanity or taking away from it? It feels like a good place to stop. So, let's take a moment to pray together. So from that place of realization, thank you, Sally. From that place of realization that we are one with the divine, that indeed there is one life, one power, one presence, one being that expresses in, through, and as all creation, we take this moment to remind ourselves of who we are, that we are indeed spiritual beings having human experience, and that in each and every moment we can be a choice. Will we bring forth the highest that is within us? Will we resonate at the level of those great teachers through the ages who have helped us to remember our spiritual essence? Will we call forth greater love, greater peace, greater compassion, greater awareness, greater understanding? You see, the Bible says, I've laid before you a banquet. The gift is freely giving. This is the grace of the divine. And so we learn to be good receivers, grateful for this opportunity, committed to giving back, to elevating the soul's consciousness for all humanity. And it is good. We bless this time, we bless this group, we bless this spiritual community. We bless our brothers and sisters across the planet, for we know that brotherhood and sisterhood of all humanity. We know that the one life expresses equally through all. We envision a world at peace. We bless our brothers and sisters teaching spiritual truth, whatever the faith, whatever the tradition. For we know where more of God is realized, healing occurs. How grateful I am for this time. How grateful I am for this community. How grateful I am to be the presence of spirit in form. And I'm also grateful for a law of consciousness that operates upon what we have spoken here, to bring forth greater good, greater possibility, working always for the highest good of all. And so it's simply with joy and gratitude that we allow it to be so, as together we say, and so it is. Amen.